Welcome to the Faith and Work podcast, where we explore what it looks like to live out your faith in the middle of your everyday life. Whether you're leading a team, managing a household, finding purpose in the small things, or driving a van, each week we will look at practical ways to bring God into your work, into your leadership, and your daily routines. Because faith was never meant to stay inside the walls of a church. So grab a coffee and lean in. Let's learn what creative ways that God is inviting us to live out our faith right where we are. If this podcast encourages you, I would love for you to share it with a friend or a coworker. Let's grow together in our faith and work.
Welcome to today's episode of Faith and Work. I have had notes for this episode in my notebook for months. And honestly, it's a topic that I've wanted to talk about, and something else will happen in the news and I'll think, oh, I really should have talked about that. And then something else will happen. I think, oh, Carole, you've had those notes. You could have been talking about this. And I've avoided it because I wanted to make sure that I was recording it with the right attitude and the right mindset. When I am passionate about something, it is easy for me to bulldoze through, and I don't want to do that with this topic. I know it can be a sensitive topic for a lot of people, and people are passionate on all different sides of this. So today, my heart is that we will talk through all the different perspectives and that you will be very informed when we finish today's episode, and that you'll be able to make the decisions that are best for you and your family. Today, as we dive into the danger of Christian cancel culture, I want to examine the pros and cons. When should we? When shouldn't we? I want to look at the reasons that we feel the need to cancel something. I want to look at a biblical perspective. And at the end, we will close out with some questions that we can ask ourselves to determine what is right for you and your family and how we can move forward when everyone around us feels like they're canceling something and we feel like we should join in, but should we? Do we really need to? Is it right for our family? Are we doing it out of guilt? What's the motive? So let's dive right into Christian cancel culture. I don't know if you saw in the news recently, but Chip and Joanna Gaines were the highlight of everything that I was seeing on social media. It was a very big deal. And I had to really dive in because I honestly didn't know what it was even about. I kept seeing all this stuff about people were canceling their trips to Waco, and it was such a big deal. And then I saw other people support Chip and Joanna Gaines, and then I saw other people say they couldn't believe that they were compromisers, and I was so confused. So I started diving into the issue with Chip and Joanna Gaines, and I started reading some of the comments that people were writing, pro, con, everything in between. Not just one perspective, not just one angle, but really trying to look and gain perspective of why everyone was so upset, and then looking at the other side of it, of what was really going on. So the issue at hand was that Chip and Joanna Gaines have a TV network. On that network, there's a show, and it's a show about people who live off the land. And on that show, in one of those episodes, is a same-sex couple. And Chip and Joanna Gaines never said anything negative or that they were pro-gay marriage, anything like that. They just had a same-sex couple on the show. So I have a lot of feelings about that because Chip and Joanna Gaines have a business that they run down in Waco. They have TV shows they produce. They have children that are now college age. I think the youngest one is maybe 4 or 5 at this point. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, they have a family of their own. And when I think about a mom and a dad producing a TV show about families, and they have a couple on the show that offers to be on the show, they fit the demographic of the type of people that they're looking for, and the casting thought this couple was a good idea, and they were on the show. Whether we agree with same-sex marriage or not, Chip and Joanna Gaines having someone on their show, whether I personally think that people that are of the same sex should not get married according to my biblical beliefs, I don't have a good gut feeling about boycotting someone who had someone on their show that was married. Let me tell you why. That might strike you as surprising, maybe not. I don't know where you stand on this issue. But the point that I want to make today, and we'll talk about several examples. This was the one that for me, I wrote it down. I thought, no, I've got to talk about this. As uncomfortable as this topic of cancel culture is, I've got to talk about it. Because here's what's interesting. There was a letter written. I don't know who it was written by. I did not write it down. But there was a letter written by a believer, and they published that letter on social media, and everyone was sharing that letter. And I'm sure there was multiple. One of the ones that I read was written by a Christian, and the Christian said, I feel like you owe us an explanation because we made you rich. You owe us an explanation because we don't believe that same-sex marriage is biblical. And now you have now put them on your show and glorified it. And therefore, you owe us an explanation. You need to come on here, justify your actions to us. That's where we go too far. You see, Chip and Joanna Gaines are accountable to God. They are not accountable to me. Every person that goes to church with me is accountable to God and not to me. Are they in a position of leadership? Yes. Are they highly visible? Yes. And they're still accountable to God. If I do not agree with Chip and Joanna Gaines, I can choose to not watch that show. I could choose to not go to Waco. The problem is that's not what people did. People called for them to publicly apologize. Then they called for other Christians who shared their belief to unfollow them, to cancel their trips to Waco. And if you didn't do that, if you didn't publicly say that you were anti-Chip and Joanna Gaines, then now somehow you don't believe in the Bible, or you don't believe in God the way you should, or you're not a strong Christian. And we've now attached meaning to our own belief to other people. And if they don't share and they don't implement the way we implement, they must not have as strong a faith as we have. And that's where we take it too far. When we say that my personal conviction must be your personal conviction and your practice, and if you don't follow my conviction and my practice, then you must not love Jesus. I don't know about you, but when I read the Bible, I can see a clear, distinct pattern for God creating one man and one woman and how he created them for life. I can also see how God and Jesus pursued people who were different than he was, people who culturally were not acceptable. Culturally, they didn't even fit in the law. They were not accepted in the law. And God pursued them. Jesus pursued them. He was not afraid to be seen with people who were different than he was. I had someone give me a compliment, and they said, I wish other people in my community could see that you can love Jesus and love gay people too. And that made me incredibly sad, and also incredible. It really humbled me, because I do love Jesus and I do love gay people. And this has nothing to do really with the individual thing of gay or same-sex marriage. This has to do with me supporting Jesus and his mission on this earth. I don't agree if a friend of mine were to get married and have an affair and leave their family. I would say that's not biblical. You shouldn't have an affair. You shouldn't cheat on your spouse. But as a believer, I should not only follow that friend or only befriend that person if they agree with me and if they do everything just like I would do it. Does that mean that there's never a time for boundaries? Absolutely. And I want to be sensitive here. I know this is a hard topic. I know this is an awkward topic, and it's a really big topic. And I want to be very sensitive with how we approach it. But Chip and Joanna Gaines do not owe me an explanation. They are accountable to God, and that is it. It doesn't matter how big their empire is. It doesn't matter how much money they make in Waco, Texas, or on any streaming service. None of that matters. And for a believer to publicly post a letter that said, "We made you rich, therefore you owe us an explanation," we are way off base. I read a lot of comments, pro, con, everything in between. That one really bothered me. Because as a believer, I am called to love. I am called to show mercy. I am called to show kindness. How I do that in my job is different than how you may do it in your job and in your circle of the world. How Chip and Joanna Gaines do that is their business. I don't have a TV station. I don't have a network. I don't know how I would implement and practice all of that. But I can tell you that we as believers have gone too far when we say, if you don't believe and implement your beliefs like I believe we should implement your beliefs, then I'm going to cancel you. A few months ago, it may have even been last year, Sadie Robertson Huff, the daughter of Willie Robertson from Duck Dynasty and Duck Commander, if you're familiar at all with that, Sadie was on Dancing with the Stars. She's a speaker, a Bible teacher. She's a gifted communicator. She posted a TikTok video of her and her sister dancing to a Beyonce video. Now, personally, I don't listen to Beyonce. That's not my style of music. That's just not my genre. My boys will probably never listen to Beyonce. If they do, it's when they're teenagers, and I won't find out about it until they're out of the house. I'm not a personal Beyonce fan. But I saw the video that she posted. I didn't think a whole lot of it. It was her and her sister dancing to the country song that Beyonce produced. And it was a, 15, 20-second clip of them doing a TikTok dance to this Beyonce song. A few days later, hours later, that video started going viral. And Sadie, I heard her give this story. She didn't know why it was going viral. She started looking at the comments and realized that it was going viral because people were so upset by it. Youth pastors were calling for their youth groups to stop following Sadie Robertson. This idea of she listens to Beyonce. Beyonce is not someone that we would support. Beyonce is not someone we would have come to our churches. Therefore, she listens to Beyonce. We can't trust anything she says. And youth pastors were calling for their youth groups to stop following Sadie Robertson, that they should not go hear her speak. They should unfollow her from all social media. They should not buy her material. That is negative Christian cancel culture. Would I do a TikTok video? Number one, I don't dance. I don't even have a TikTok account. I don't know how to do any of that. You do not. If I dance, it's a slow dance with my husband at a wedding or in our kitchen. I don't do choreographed dances. It is not my spiritual gift. But should I call for everyone to boycott Sadie because she made that decision? Who is Sadie accountable to? She's accountable to God. Is she a public figure? Yes. Do we agree with all things that public figures do? No, we don't. But if we take it too far, when we say, if you don't implement your Christian beliefs the way I implement my Christian beliefs, you must not love Jesus. Or you don't implement your Christian beliefs the way I implement my Christian beliefs, you're dangerous. And you're probably preaching a false gospel. That's exactly what the disciples did in Mark and in Luke 9. Mark 9 and Luke 9. When they asked Jesus, other people are casting out demons and they're doing it in your name, but they're not walking with us. And the disciples said, we told them to stop. And Jesus said, don't tell them to stop. They're not against us. They're not against us. And Jesus rebuked that spirit in them. And you have to imagine that time right when the disciples asked this, it was in the same chapter of the Bible where Jesus had just cast out the demons from the young boy who was filled with demons, and his parents brought him, and they said, we've taken him everywhere else, and no one can cast out these demons. I can only imagine how afraid and scared they were. And they said, your disciples tried, and they couldn't. And then Jesus prayed, and he cast out the demons, and the boy was miraculously healed. And right after that, the disciples said, how come you could do that and we couldn't? And he said, this comes only from prayer and fasting. And then they said, well, just so you know, someone else was casting out demons in your name. And we told them, but they don't walk with us. And we told them to stop. And he said, they're not against us just because they're not walking with us. I may not listen to Beyonce. And I don't have a TV station where I have to make the decisions of, does everyone on that station need to align with my biblical beliefs or not? I don't have that kind of responsibility on my shoulders. But we need to be very cautious as we think about the people who do have that responsibility on their shoulders. How many times before we have reposted something or commented on something or liked something or we've shared it or we've sent a screenshot to a friend and we've said, hey, can you believe they did this? Can you believe so-and-so did blank, blank, blank? We have not stopped and prayed that they would have wisdom on how to navigate it. We've said, hey, you say you're a Christian. You should do what I would do because I would not do that. I would not support people who believe in same-sex marriage. I would not post a video of Beyonce. Okay, that's great to know. But instead of stopping and saying, God, Sadie is a really young influencer. Give her wisdom as she makes these decisions. God, Chip and Joanna have a big responsibility on their shoulders. Give them wisdom as they navigate these conversations. These can't be easy conversations. Give them wisdom in how they navigate this. But we didn't do that. Well, I can't say not everyone did. I would say the vast majority did not. Instead, what they did was we shared it, we liked it, we reposted it with our own thoughts. And we say, you know what? I'm not shopping at Target anymore. I'm not going to buy anything from Heart and Hand anymore. I am not going to go to Waco. I can't believe it. I'm going to boycott their show. I'm not going to buy her cookbooks anymore. I saw some really, really hateful comments because they had a same-sex couple on their show. Whether you agree with same-sex marriage or not, from a biblical perspective, I can't agree with same-sex marriage. But that doesn't mean that I am going to be ugly. I'm not going to be unkind. I'm going to love every person in my life that is different than I am, even if we disagree. I'm going to love them the same way as I would love someone who agrees with me. That doesn't mean that I support every decision they make. I don't support every decision that people that do align 100% with me. But from a biblical perspective, I wouldn't agree with all the decisions they make. And people that don't align with me from a biblical perspective, I'm not going to agree with all their decisions either. But the Bible calls me to love them just the same. I want to encourage you to stop and do the right thing biblically, and that is to pray and to talk to Jesus about it more than you talk to your online following. Growing up in conservative Christian culture, there was often a divide with people who believed something slightly different than what you believed. It was mostly the same, but slightly different. And what I saw a lot of, not in every case, but a lot of cases, is that people who were motivated to dive in and do research on theological issues, they were doing it out of an effort to prove someone else wrong. So for many, many years of my Christian life, I never wanted to study theology. I had no interest in diving in to a theological debate or conversation because it always felt so divisive to me. And it wasn't until my 30s when I started hearing theology talked about in a different lens. I started hearing theology from a perspective of, what if we studied it to get to know God more? And it's the same way with hot topic issues. What if I studied the Bible as an effort to get to know the God who wrote it? What if, as a daughter of God, I studied it just to get to know my God? When we start deep diving into research, we start sometimes going down a rabbit trail to prove ourselves right and to make ourselves feel better about our reactions or about our decisions, our emotions. If we're angry about something, we can start going into a deep rabbit trail of research, and the research is not to learn, it is to justify. And that's not right. Recently, I saw a reel on Instagram that I just strongly disagreed with. And I so wanted to, someone that I know had shared it. And I thought, I cannot believe this. It's just not historically accurate. It's not biblically defensible. And I wanted to go back to the original person who posted it, and then I wanted to comment on it, and I wanted to tell them how wrong they were. And I thought, no, that's too far. I won't do that. But what I will do is maybe I'll just make a reel myself, and I'll explain why this is so wrong. And man, I was fired up making this reel. I had made all the different clips. I was putting it together. I was putting music behind it, adding all the stuff. And I kept having audio issues with the different clips. And the Holy Spirit kept telling me, are you really going to post this video? Is this really how you want to use your voice? Is this what I've called you to do? Is this part of living out your faith at work? And I kept editing, and I just kept thinking, well, Lord, but this isn't right. Biblically, this is not right. But my motivation was wrong. And I had to stop editing, and I deleted it. And I never published it. The video was talking about the historical background of women in the workplace, and they quoted some things that historically were not accurate. And then they started talking about some biblical things, but they were, again, not accurate. And it frustrated me. And in the video, I said, if we're going to get fired up about anything, let's get fired up about what God has for us to do. And I was doing the exact opposite of that by even taking my time to create content. And that content was literally made in defense to try to defend what God's called me to do. And I thought, okay, Carole, God's called you to speak and to stand up and to have a voice and a passion for living out your faith at work. This is not part of that. You don't need to defend your call. You just need to go do your call. And so I deleted it and moved on. But I literally had the contents of the danger of Christian cancel culture. I had the notes written down in my notebook, and I thought again, like, Carole, you almost caved to the very trap that you were telling other people to watch out for. Did I pray for that girl? No, I didn't. Did I stop and say, God, where did she get that? Who told her this was true? Did she read the Bible at all? Because it feels like from that perspective, she would have easily seen that that's not right. And instead of stopping to pray that God would send someone in her community to gently speak up and say, you probably had really, really good intentions here, but you missed the mark on this. I don't know her, and I have no connection to her at all. And maybe one day, if I can get less fired up about that specific reel, maybe one day I could reach out. But I was not in the right headspace to do it then. I was fueled by frustration and not fueled by compassion. And that's something we have to be mindful of. I'm not saying that there aren't times that we need to speak up. And there are not moments when we need to call out sin, or there are moments for us to use that voice and to speak up. But first, before we use our voice, we need to get on our knees. before we use our voice and raise our hand and point our finger, we need to first humbly bow before God and make sure we're doing it in the right attitude, with the right spirit. Before we defend, before we jump in to defend someone, we need to make sure that we're doing it for the right reasons. David and I both grew up pretty conservative, but several years ago, someone added me to a Facebook group called The Recovering Fundamentalist. And it was pretty entertaining for a long time, I have to admit. And it was people's stories of leaving the independent fundamental movement. There's a lot of hurt. And new people were constantly added to the group. And when new people were added, part of their processing was saying out loud what they dealt with in their journey of leaving fundamentalism. And what I started realizing is that I wasn't a part of that movement anymore. But every time I read someone else's story, I would get mad all over again and get angry all over again. And one night I was about to go to bed, which is a terrible idea before you go to bed to start reading a Facebook group post. Like, that's just a terrible, terrible idea. And I had read one story and I was just fired up about what these people had gone through. And I started reading it out loud to my husband. I said, "Can you believe what happened?" And he looked at me and he said, "Carole, why do you even read this stuff?" And it was convicting. And I realized that I was staying stuck reading these posts for a group that I wasn't even a part of anymore. And part of my healing journey had to be walking away from that level of negativity, because those people were healing. But part of my healing was to step away because I wasn't there anymore. I was in a much better place with God. I was in a place where I was healing. My relationship with God was stronger than it had ever been. I was reading my Bible. I was diving in. I was feeling so connected. I was in a good church culture. I was in a good place. But every time I read one of those stories, it was like being drugged back into all the drama that I wasn't even a part of anymore. And the next day, got out of that group. And I'm not saying that group is bad. There's a lot of groups that help a lot of people recover from things. But when I was in that particular group, it just felt like story after story after story. And then it was just gas on the fire and people stayed angry. And I didn't want to stay angry anymore. I needed to walk away and to heal from that. And sometimes when we read stories of other people's hurt and we read stories of what other people went through, it can make us again feel justified in our actions to be unkind to people. And we think, well, so-and-so from this same group, they are also independent fundamental Baptist. Therefore, they must be awful like the group that so-and-so just talked about in this Facebook group over here. And we can use that to justify actions to treat people poorly. And that is not the example that Jesus set for us in the New Testament. That is not the example that we see anywhere represented in the Bible. We feel emboldened, not for God. Not for God. We feel emboldened because people don't practice their faith the way we think they should practice their faith. That's what hurts me so much, is that we are causing a divide. We're literally causing a divide where there doesn't need to be a divide. Instead of saying, I'm gonna stop and pray about that. Or I'm going to call that person directly. If I have something with my brother in Christ specifically, instead of calling them and dealing with it, with me and that person, I tell other people what they did, and then I shun them, or I block them on social media, or I tell other people what an awful person they are, what a terrible businessman they are. And that's not biblical. If you follow the Christian music industry, you've probably seen the story of Forrest Frank. Forrest Frank is a up-and-coming major Christian artist that has just taken off in the last couple of years. God has just used that young man in a way that is unlike anything I've ever really seen when it comes to young Christian artists. Recently, he had an injury where he broke his back. And there were other Christian artists who were making videos that were on the humorous side. One was serious, and then after that, they kind of started to turn humorous. And because of the serious nature of Forrest's injury and the miraculous recovery that he had, when those humorous videos were made, that really cut him pretty deep because of how serious it was. And if you're on social media with somebody, there's no way to know what's really going on in their heart and their life. We're not there for the day-to-day to see what the day-to-day actually looks like when someone is traveling through a health journey. And what I appreciate about these other videos that were made in a humorous, light nature, I saw several of them, and I didn't think a whole lot of it. I thought, oh, that may be a little too much. That humor may have gone a little bit too dark. I didn't think that it would be offensive to Forrest, but I'm not Forrest. So what happened was, and how it all played out, was that Forrest contacted those individual artists one-on-one, and they had a phone call. And he talked to them and said, hey, this actually really hurt when you posted this. And as far as I know, all of those artists that he called and dealt with that one-on-one, they all took the videos down and they said, hey, man, that wasn't my intent. I'm so sorry. And then there was one specific one, Corey Asbury, and him and Corey recorded each other's reactions to watching each other's videos about it. And I'm so glad they did. And here's why I'm glad, is because this was the opposite of Christian cancel culture. This is Christian accountability culture. And that is really what happened here. Forrest went straight to Corey and said, hey, this is too far, man. And Corey called him. Then they both made a video about it. Because it was public, they handled it publicly. Their offense was between each other, but a lot of people saw it. They recorded it. They apologized to each other publicly, and they moved forward. They're friends now, and they post videos together, and it's a beautiful thing. Because instead of Forrest Frank, who had, I don't even know, probably triple the followers that Corey had, and Corey's been on the circuit for longer, Forrest is newer, but his style of music, God has just used him in a very unique way. His platform has taken off. He has the bigger platform, and he used it in a way that was humble and that was merciful. And when we think about all of you, each individual person, each individual heartbeat listening to this podcast, every state represented, every country represented, we all have a community and a platform. If you are in a neighborhood or a high rise, if you're out in the country like I am, or if you're in the city limits, all of us have a platform. We have neighbors. We have families. We have schools. We have jobs. We have churches. We have nonprofits. We have our area local grocery store, our post office, our library. All the area that we go to online, they call it a platform. In person, we call it community. All of us have a platform in a community where we can have accountability conversations one-on-one, or we can have a cancel conversation and say, we really shouldn't invite so-and-so to our mom's night out anymore. Did you see what she posted on social media recently? Her political views are so different than ours. We should not invite her back. No. You should call her right now and invite her. Because she is different. And she deserves a seat at that table too. God did not call you to love people who are just like you. And I don't know how different she is, but it doesn't matter. A few questions that I want to encourage you to stop and ask yourself. Is this a primary issue for me? When you see something on social media, on the news, you hear something in person and you think, oh no, I don't agree with that. Is this a primary issue? Or is it something that just makes you uncomfortable? Is the issue unethical? Is it illegal? Is the action sinful? When we think about why we cancel somebody or why we decide to block someone on social media, is it because we disagree with them? Is it because they make us uncomfortable? Why? What motivates us to do that? Before you hit cancel on somebody, figuratively and literally, before you block someone, before you take someone out of your phone, before you stop inviting someone to the mom's night out, before you stop inviting the businessman to lunch because he doesn't agree with something else that you said and he challenged your perspective, and now he's not going to get invited anymore back to the lunch. Before we decide to do that and we have this mindset of, you disagree with me, therefore I will not put myself in your presence. Christian cancel culture is so much bigger. It is so much bigger than the Sadie Robertsons and the Chip and Joanna Gaines of the world. It is so much bigger than the Forrest Franks of the world. And it's even bigger than my little reel that I had to delete because I was responding out of an unhealthy emotion and motive. Christian cancel culture happens when we don't like that someone challenges our point of view and we avoid them. When we're not solid enough in what we believe to defend ourselves and we don't like it, so we just cancel the whole thing. That's the problem with Christian cancel culture. We can easily label something as a standard or a conviction and use it as an excuse for how we treat people, and it's wrong. A standard or a conviction is between you and God. And if another brother or sister in Christ or someone that I work with that is not a brother and sister in Christ, some people that I work with are believers, some people aren't. And we've got to stop expecting other people to believe just like we believe and to implement just like we implement. And because they don't believe like we believe, we use that as a justification for treating them with rudeness and with a lack of humility. What is my motivation? Is the action wrong, or does it just make me uncomfortable? Is it sinful? Is this something that God has told me is a personal boundary? Maybe it's an area of weakness in your life and you think, you know what, I don't feel comfortable being around this. That's completely different. I've known people who struggled with alcohol addiction. And they had a hard time even being at weddings where alcohol was served because the aroma in the air was strong for them and they were tempted to go back. And so they would go to the wedding, they would greet the bride and groom, and then they would leave. That is a great example of setting a healthy boundary. The problem comes when we say, you know what, you should not go to weddings where they serve alcohol, because that is just wrong. Because you will be tempted and you will get drunk and you will make bad decisions and then you'll drive home and you'll have an accident. And we tell this narrative that if everyone doesn't do what we do, they're wrong. Well, I don't personally feel a conviction with going to weddings that serve alcohol. That doesn't bother me in the least. But some people do. And that is a great example of setting a healthy boundary. But when we call for other people to enforce our boundaries, and if they don't enforce our boundaries, they're not in alignment with God. They're not in alignment with the Bible. And other people, if you don't agree, then we'll cancel you too. That's where we go too far. Something you have to ask yourself is this: am I hunting for negative information? There's a whole group of people online that search for sound bites they can share. And they literally hunt for negative information. They splice it all into pieces and they share it out. And it causes a complete and total ruckus. If you look at anything on YouTube that has a lot of views, typically it's got some crazy outlandish title. And you're like, oh, wow, is that really true? Then you watch it and you're like, oh, that title wasn't really true. But it got your attention. That was clickbait. And if you can go online right now and you can search for anything that says like crazy sermons or wrong doctrine, wrong philosophy, heresy, you can search for all kind of stuff. And you will find a lot of 10 and 15-second clips or even shorter You have no idea what was said right before or right after, and it's a lot harder to find that original clip. Are you just hunting for negative information? How are you getting this information, and who are you getting it from? Is this a trusted source? Is this a random online source that you've never seen before? Have you even verified that it's true before you've shared it? Have you prayed about it at all? How should you respond? And should you even respond at all? If yes, if you do feel like God is saying, yes, you need to respond to this. Yes, this is something you need to speak up about. What should you say? There's a few signs that you shouldn't say anything. If you haven't verified that it's even a fact, then you shouldn't share it. If reposting some content makes you feel justified, then you shouldn't share it. You've got to check your own heart, check your own motives, and make sure that before you share anything, before you cancel anything, that you get with God. You spend some time with Him. Friends, I know that today's topic was a little different, but it's been on my heart for a long time. And there's people that we work with who are different than we are. And that's 100% normal and okay. And we don't need to cancel them because they're different than we are. There's people that I go to church with who believe something different than I believe. That's okay. There's people at my son's school that believe something different than I believe. That is okay. I don't need them to agree with me on everything. When we all get to heaven, we're going to find out how wrong we all were on a variety of different topics. And it's probably not even the topics that we think we could be wrong. We're going to read and we're going to understand things in Scripture that we think, oh man, we misinterpreted that so wrong. We're going to get it one day. But today, until we have full, complete knowledge and understanding, I would ask that we proceed with grace, we proceed with caution, and that we proceed with the filling of the Holy Ghost and not an unhealthy motive. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of Faith at Work. If today's conversation encouraged you, I would love for you to share it with a friend or a coworker. And I would love to hear what you think. So you can text me at 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback. And if you have questions that you would like answered on a future episode, leave me your name and the city and state that you are reaching out to me from. That number again is 615-669-3209. I would love to hear your thoughts. I look forward to being with you again next week. Until then, let's keep living out our faith at work.